A young man named Lloyd was called to a meeting and told that he had been removed from their team. The leader of the group, a hero named Alan, announced this. He reproached Lloyd for being useless, saying that he was always lagging behind and only getting in the way. Lloyd was a white mage. Sorceress Miyawaya turned away with disdain, calling him of low rank. Archer Ruru emphasized that the honor of serving a hero requires competence. When Lloyd asked if she thought he was insufficient, Alan confirmed it, pointing out that he couldn't even heal Shanina in time. Sheena, the team's priestess, admitted that she believed him to be the reason Alan's reputation had fallen. Lloyd merely muttered that he had taken the hint. Shield-bearer Lena interrupted him, saying that he had finally realized his worthlessness. Alan added that if that was the case, he should leave the money he had earned and disappear. Lloyd looked at him calmly and asked why. Alan, seething, jumped up and declared that since Lloyd was dragging the team down, he had to pay up. Lloyd, realizing that otherwise they would not leave him alone, took a bag of money from his pocket and silently handed it over. Alan immediately snatched the bag, pleased with the upcoming dinner. Sheena hugged him, admiring him, which caused the envy of the other girls, outraged by her impudence. Sheena was jubilant, happy to be rid of the ballast. The entire team nodded approvingly, agreeing that Alan was the best. Lloyd silently walked out of the building and paused at the entrance, taking one last look at the impressive mansion. He noted sadly that he had no idea of their hatred. If he had known, he would have asked the master to teach him how to get along with people. His thoughts took him back to the time when his mentor told him about her plans to create magic that could stop aging. It was she who had taken him in as a child and raised him in the mountains. In his younger years, he helped around the house, conducted experiments, and trained from dawn to dusk every day without rest. The master warned him not to overestimate his strength because he was only a boy. Despite this, he learned a lot. The daily routine was unbearably hard. Tired of his exhausting life, he decided to leave the mountains and went to the city of Ishtar, dreaming of freedom away from his mentor. In the city, he stopped by a statue and noticed that Merlin was also honored here. He carefully examined the statue and noted with irony that it did not at all resemble the real Merlin, especially in the bust area. A girl came up to him and asked if he was a fan of Merlin. Lloyd answered vaguely. The girl was surprised. After all, he was clearly staring at the statue. She had no time to argue. She said she was urgently looking for a free white mage, and there was time until tomorrow. According to her, she had been running around the city all day. Lloyd noted that, in fact, he was a white mage. To some extent, the girl was surprised, because she had never seen him before. She asked if he was an adventurer. Lloyd confirmed, adding that he was more unemployed than free. She looked at him carefully and decided that he was the free white magician she needed. She grabbed his hand and dragged him somewhere, not giving him time to think. They entered a large building. The girl said that she had returned. Inside, her team was waiting for her. One of the guys called her Yui and was surprised by her speed, thinking that she had not managed to find a mage. Yui confidently said that she had found one. Everyone looked at Lloyd. Yui tried to introduce him, but hesitated, not knowing his name. Then Lloyd introduced himself. Yui added that he was a white mage, although Archer Cross interrupted her, expressing doubt that the A-rank mission could be completed without her. Shield-bearer Dagus supported him, saying that a newbie would hardly be able to replace her. Mage Silica nodded in agreement. Lloyd, beginning to realize where he was, tried to protest that he had said nothing about joining, but B interrupted him, reminding him that without a mage, the clients who needed help would suffer. He thought, it's not about profit, it's about people. However, the higher the mission rank, the greater the reward. In other words, both the risk and the cost increase. So it's very difficult to get such a task. He asked why they didn't pass the case to another group. Silica explained that there was a rank limit. Yui clarified that they were an S-rank team. Silica added that there were no other teams in this city that met the requirements. Lloyd was shocked, because that was the highest rank. He noted that adventurers were required to work only in registered teams, and were not allowed to take people from others. That was why they were looking for a free white mage. He thought that he wanted to help, but it was beyond his powers. But Yui spoke again, suggesting that if Lloyd was truly a talented mage, they could do it. Lloyd looked at her, thinking. Dagus said that in that case, they had a chance, but he added that he still doubted it. Then Yui interrupted again and asked Lloyd to demonstrate his magic, offering to follow her. The entire team went outside, waiting with bated breath. Lloyd felt embarrassed and guilty. Everything that was happening seemed ridiculous. He mentally apologized because, like before, everything would go wrong again. He would disappoint them all in the end. Yui stated that she wanted him to cast the most powerful spell on them all at once, not one by one. Lloyd looked at the girl with surprise and a question in his eyes. Cross intervened and said that this was too much for a regular white mage. Maybe he should stop. Lloyd thought that he didn't understand, because it wasn't difficult at all. It will be quite easy for him. Yui watched him warily and asked him that he couldn't do it, could he? Lloyd replied that no, he could. He had expected them to ask him to perform a more difficult spell to see if he was fit for their team. But he could do this without any trouble. He clenched his fist, deciding that he could do it. They are clearly looking for something. Then he began to practice witchcraft. He created a staff, which surprised Yui and her entire team. Lloyd decided to cast a buff spell on everyone at once. 5 effects: body strengthening, defense strengthening, magic power strengthening, mana consumption reduction, and resilience increase. Lloyd thought he needed to train more. Silica asked in surprise where he had just gotten that staff from. Lloyd replied that he had used storage magic, and then asked what they thought of his enhancement magic. Yui asked him how he did it. He didn't even say a word, but she felt better. She went to a nearby tree and suggested that he try. Immediately, with one swing of her sword, she cut down a huge tree. Everyone was shocked, not believing their eyes. Lloyd calmly listed the effects he had imposed and said that it was the result of his magic. Everyone was silent, just staring at him. Lloyd thought there was no reaction at all. Perhaps his magic is too weak for them. He decided it was time to leave, but Yui stopped him and asked if he wanted to join their team. Lloyd stopped, listened to their proposal with surprise, and asked if this was the team of heroes, under the leadership of one of the 4 great heroes. They answered that yes. Lloyd noted that he was kicked out of the team because of the weakness of his magic. Cross said that if his magic was really weak, quote, Lloyd interrupted him, noting that there was a white mage on their team originally, and if this was a one-time situation, then he didn't need to officially join the team, right? Yui added that her name was Crumb. She explained that she had a sick sister and worked as an adventurer to take care of her. This often left her tired. Silica added that this was why she couldn't be on this quest. Cross noted that this had always been a problem, but in recent days the situation had become especially worrisome. Yui suggested that she leave the team, but she refused because it would create more problems. Lloyd realized that this was why they were looking for a white mage to help her and solve these problems. Yui apologized for dragging him into this. Lloyd said that it was not difficult for him to help, and if he could be of any use, he was ready. He agreed to join their team if they didn't mind. Yui was delighted and asked if it was true. The whole team was happy that such a strong mage like him joined them. Yui walked up to him and extended her hand, looking forward to starting their work together. Lloyd shook her hand and said he was happy to join in. Yui, in turn, suggested throwing a welcoming party. Lloyd tried to stop her, but she insisted. Welcome party is a must. Lloyd thought that after he was kicked off the hero team, he didn't know what would happen next. But now he has a chance to move forward. Yui said that there will also be a strategy meeting. Now, let everyone follow her. The whole team headed to the nearest tavern to celebrate this moment. They sat down at one big table and started celebrating. Yui stated that they should celebrate Lloyd joining the team. Now they need to drink, because it's all at their expense. And Lloyd can drink and eat as much as he wants. Silica smiled and admitted that she doesn't drink alcohol either, so she sticks to juice. Lloyd explained that it's not that he can't drink, he just has some trauma from his past. Yui became curious and asked what exactly had happened. Cross quickly stopped her, hinting that it was not worth bringing up such a topic. But Yui insisted, not understanding what the problem was. 2 years ago, Merlin told Lloyd that since he was becoming an adult, they should celebrate this event in an adult way, with alcohol. Lloyd tried to deflect the offer by saying he wouldn't drink, but Merlin insisted they had to drink at least 10 or 20 bottles. He was eventually forced to drink so much that he was sick all night. When he told his new team about it, he admitted that the evening had been a nightmare. Yui curiously asked who his mentor was. Cross expressed interest, noting that she was clearly an interesting person. Silica guessed that she was probably a white mage as well. Lloyd replied that she didn't quite. When it came to combat, she used destructive spells more often. Explosions were especially impressive. Silica specified that despite this, she taught him support magic. Lloyd confirmed that she was an order of magnitude better at this than he was. Silica, blushing slightly, admitted that she would like to meet his mentor. But Lloyd interrupted her abruptly, firmly declaring that she should not even think about it. The only thing she could teach, he fell silent, lost in his dark memories. Silica understood everything immediately and nodded without insisting. Yui quickly changed the subject and said that now was the time to discuss their mission. But since it was difficult for her to explain, she asked Dagus to tell her everything. He noted that since she was the leader, she should handle it herself. Yui glared at him and asked what he meant by hypothetically. Dagus realized that there was no point in arguing and gave in, agreeing to take it upon himself. He explained that their mission was to eliminate large wolves that were devastating the plantation. Lloyd thought about it. These creatures usually hunt in packs and live in forests, attacking other monsters or animals for food. He asked what exactly was being grown on the plantation. Silica replied that it was only vegetables, no livestock or other animals. Lloyd was surprised, because wolves are carnivores and do not attack farms without reason. Yui clarified that the difficulty of the task is in the large number of these wolves. The exact number is unknown, but there are indeed many of them. If there are too many of them, then they are counting on Silica. Silica confirmed that she could handle it, but warned that mass spells require a huge amount of mana. Therefore, depending on the situation, the task may be difficult. Yui then turned to Lloyd and asked if he could use attack magic. Lloyd replied that although he could attack, he was inferior to professionals in this regard, since he was a white mage after all. He added that it would be more effective if he focused on strengthening Silica. Yui nodded. Silica, hearing this, looked at Lloyd with embarrassment. Her cheeks turned pink. She said that she would look forward to his spells. Lloyd, slightly embarrassed, looked away and advised not to place too much hope in him. Yui, in turn, noted that he should be more confident. Cross added that Lloyd had already been through a lot. And besides, he likes people like Lloyd, those who remain humble despite their strength. Better than arrogant warriors. Then Dagus began to explain his plan of action. He and Yui would distract the wolves. Once they were together, Silica would cast a spell on them. Cross interrupted, asking what he would do. Dagus said that Cross would cover for Silica and Lloyd will focus on support and recovery. Lloyd confirmed that he understood everything. Dagus added that the rest of the details will be determined on site, after reconnaissance. At this point, Yui changed the subject again, deciding that it was enough to discuss plans. She suggested that they continue the evening with drinks and fun. Dagus grabbed her by the collar and dragged her towards the exit. Yui protested, asking what he was doing. Dagus replied that it was time to leave, because they had an important mission tomorrow. Yui did not want to leave, insisting that she had not drunk enough, and struggled, demanding that she be let go. As they walked out, Lloyd called out to Dagus, stopping him. He asked where the meeting would take place tomorrow. Dagus was surprised. Wouldn't he be spending the night in the same tavern? Lloyd replied that he couldn't stay there. Dagus understood everything without words, sighed heavily, and with a kind smile threw him a bag of money, telling him to take it. Lloyd refused, but Dagus insisted he would still keep the amount from the total reward. He added that it was time to go, since Yui and the others were already waiting. Lloyd nodded, promising that he would definitely return everything. He felt genuine gratitude and warmth for this team. He realized that he had found truly kind and sympathetic people. At the same time, his former team encountered difficulties on a mission. Alan was surrounded by monsters and screamed in panic, not understanding why they had become so strong. Ruru also held on with all her might, exhausted by the onslaught of enemies. Ruru could hardly hold on and shouted that these creatures were too strong. Her arrows simply bounced off their bodies. The team's mage couldn't cope either and panicked, saying that the golems weren't that powerful before. Something strange was clearly going on here. Alan recalled that not long ago these golems were easy prey. He rushed forward, intending to prove that the hero's team had no right to lose. He managed to hit one of the monsters and noted with enthusiasm that his attack had worked. But the next moment, behind the golem, he noticed a vague silhouette and thought that perhaps someone else was hiding behind it. It was a wolf, so fast that before Alan could even comprehend it was already behind him. He gasped, realizing that the situation was becoming critical. Alan shouted to Lena, warning her that danger was right behind her. The girl barely had time to turn around and put her hand out to block the attack. The wolf sank his teeth into her forearm. Lena gritted her teeth, whispering that it was damn close. Then there was a terrible crunch. The wolf bit off her hand. Lena screamed at the top of her voice, letting out a painful cry. Alan immediately rushed to her side, begging her to hold on. He sharply ordered Sheena to begin the treatment. She nodded, shaking with fear, assuring that she understood everything. The team tried not to panic, repeating that everything was under control. Shamana ran up to Lena and activated a healing spell. Alan and the others continued to fight, hoping that Sheena would have time to finish the treatment. But suddenly, she whispered a question in surprise. Her spell didn't work. Lena's wound didn't heal. Ruru desperately suggested that Alan retreat. He knew it himself, but his heart wouldn't let him give in. However, the situation left them with only one option: escape. Alan picked up Lena, whispering why everything turned out so badly. Soon, rumors about the failure of the mission and the escape of the hero's team spread throughout the kingdom. The next morning arrived. Yui's team was already assembled, rested, and ready for a new challenge. One of them turned to Lloyd, asking if he minded. He nodded and answered in the affirmative. He activated the storage magic. The familiar staff appeared in his hands, and all the heavy bags were transferred to the spatial storage. The girls were delighted and thanked him. Yui exclaimed that there were no more burdens. Silica noted that the journey would take a couple of days, and Lloyd made it very easy for them. He calmly said that it was not difficult and promised to teach her in the future. The girls were surprised and asked if it was possible. Lloyd, with his usual calm, replied that the training would take about an hour, but he added that it would take time to expand the capacity. Cross marveled, saying that with such a capability he could carry an infinite number of arrows. Lloyd promised to tell him more as soon as he had a free minute. Then Dagus gave the command to leave. The team left the city and went to the mission site, to the plantations. They reached the desired point and set up camp. Dagus approvingly said that the preparations were complete. Silica was glad they had arrived early. Cross added that the journey had been easy due to the lack of cargo. Dagus suggested lighting a fire. He wanted to add something, but Yui interrupted him. She hugged Silica and said that she saw a river on the way and wanted to swim with her. Silica asked in surprise if it was true with her. Yui nodded, and Dagus said that there was no problem with that. Cross volunteered to remain on guard duty at the camp. Dagus instructed Lloyd to gather firewood and gave Cross a signaling device in case of an unexpected attack. The team went their separate ways, each doing their assigned task. Lloyd wandered through the forest, filling his storehouse with firewood. Having collected a decent amount, he told himself that there was still room left, and it was worth stocking up. Looking up, he noticed some fruit on the tree. Without hesitation, he climbed up the branches and was pleased to see that these were the same fruits that grew near his master's house. Lloyd broke the fruit open and noted that it was not only very sweet, but also incredibly nutritious. He wondered if he should pick some more and take it with him. But just as he reached for the next fruit, the branch beneath him snapped and he fell noisily down into the river. He emerged and muttered with relief that he was lucky. The water had softened his fall and saved him from injury. Silica and Yui appeared before him, both completely naked. Upon seeing him, they asked him in unison what he was doing here. Lloyd froze in horror, silently praying that this was just a nightmare. He screamed that it was a misunderstanding and apologized, explaining that he had accidentally fallen. But before he could say more, Yui hit him wordlessly, calling him a little pervert. After this awkward situation, the whole team gathered again at the camp. Dagus gave Lloyd a displeased look and noted that he was late, as were the two girls with him. Yui apologized, explaining that they had run into Lloyd on the way and gotten into a conversation. Lloyd remembered explaining everything, and they eventually believing him. He felt indebted to them again. Dagus nodded and said that now they had to decide how to organize the night watch. When everyone sat around the fire, Lloyd suggested that they would work in pairs. Yui immediately responded. She asked if Lloyd would like to join her that night. He agreed, noting to himself that perhaps she just wants to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't do anything suspicious. Yui responded by wishing for both of them to be responsible. Night fell, and it was their turn to be on duty. Yui looked around and noted that there didn't seem to be any threats nearby. Lloyd agreed with her. She suddenly looked at him intently. Lloyd asked if something was wrong. Yui replied that everything was fine and sat down opposite, ready to talk. She admitted that she felt bad about dragging him into such a mess. Lloyd replied that he was worried too, because he was out of work. Yui added that she still felt guilty. Now was not the right time. Lloyd asked why this task was so important to her. Yui asked if it really showed. She took a deep breath and said it reminded her of her hometown. Then, as a child, she survived an attack by monsters. Almost all the inhabitants were killed. She screamed, called for her parents, but in response, only silence. Then people came, and were horrified by what had happened. Among the ruins, they found only her. These people came up and promised that she was now safe and would not be left alone anymore. Yui shared with Lloyd that this was why she couldn't just stand by when she heard about the attacks. After all, if the food from the plantations didn't reach the villages, many people would be in trouble. Lloyd nodded, understanding her. At that moment, they heard a suspicious sound behind them and turned around sharply. They couldn't ignore the noise and decided to check what was going on. As they got closer, they came across a giant spider. Lloyd noted with annoyance that the moment was unfortunate. They couldn't handle it together. Yui immediately got into a fighting stance and asked him to wake the others while she held off the monster. Lloyd agreed and said that then let her, but he didn't have time to finish speaking. The spider suddenly turned and walked away. They were both stunned with surprise. Yui suggested that perhaps there was something else nearby that had scared the spider away. Lloyd shook his head. He didn't feel threatened. He was sure that it was safe nearby. Yui believed him and did not argue anymore. Several days passed after they left Ishtar. The team was still moving through the dense forest. Yui noted that something was wrong with this place. Cross was surprised to see that there were no monsters here at all. Dagus then turned to Lloyd, asking if he was involved. Lloyd said no. He sometimes uses detection, but it doesn't scare away monsters. Yui wondered what the problem was then. Lloyd said he'd try to expand the detection radius. A moment later, he froze. He had discovered something. The others noticed his wariness and asked what was going on. Lloyd said that there was a huge concentration of monsters in one spot. It would not be possible to see them just like that. The team was amazed and asked if this was true. Lloyd confidently confirmed it. He explained that the monsters were about 10 kilometers from here. There were a lot of them, and their strength was no joke. Pointing to the direction, he confirmed that this was where they were headed. Cross-checked the map and confirmed the match. Yui raised her hand and asked everyone to stop, asking again, 10 kilometers, right? Lloyd confirmed that yes, the monsters were 10 kilometers away. Yui then asked if he could really pinpoint objects at such a distance so accurately. Lloyd replied that it was true, but it required a significant expenditure of magical energy. He became wary and asked if he had said anything unnecessary. Dagus, guessing Yui's thoughts, quietly remarked that he understood her concerns, but they did not have time to doubt. Then Dagus got down to business and asked Lloyd if he knew the exact coordinates of the monster cluster. Lloyd confirmed it. Cross admitted that he had begun to think he had seen the limits of his abilities, but Lloyd had amazed him again. The other girls agreed. He was truly unusual. The team checked the map again and concluded that the flock was indeed on the customer's plantation. They reached the slope and surveyed the area from above, trying to understand, what the hell are they seeing now? The entire plantation was surrounded by a dense ring of monsters. Lloyd frowned and said that something was wrong. Yui agreed, noticing the huge number of creatures. But that was not what Lloyd meant. This was the only place where the detector had recorded anything. So where were the other monsters? Silica thought about it and noted that there must be creatures somewhere that were much more dangerous than these wolves. Cross added that there was no sign of fighting in the forest. Dagus summed it up. It means that the others disappeared without a trace, without even entering the battle. Lloyd asked where the owner of the plantation was. Yui replied that he was injured and was at his son's house. Lloyd nodded, saying that was understandable. He thought it would be worthwhile to find at least some traces of what was happening. At that moment, Cross noticed something in the distance and pointed, wondering what it was. Lloyd and Yui squinted into the darkness. Yui was confused as to what was going on, and Cross pointed to a strange black rock. Lloyd admitted that he couldn't see anything yet, but it sounded alarming. Then, he activated the body enhancement magic. Concentrating, he created his own spell, instantly enhancing his vision. Closing his eyes, he applied the effect and opened them again. Now he clearly saw the very black stone that Cross had spoken of. The stone was in the very center of the monster cluster. Lloyd said he could see it now, and it did look suspicious, Yui asked, and he confirmed that he had used a strengthening spell. She asked him to describe what he saw, and the others were interested too. Lloyd began his explanation by repeating that Cross was right. The stone was indeed strange. Yui remarked that she found it mysterious. Lloyd said that he felt a flow of mana from it. He noted that this object was not seen among the wolves, but it was emitting magical energy. Moreover, he felt something different. The magic emanating from it was beast-like in nature. He remembered his mentor's words. Some beastmen possessed rare magic that could subdue monsters. If this was the case, then the situation took on a completely different meaning. Suddenly, he felt something again. His detector picked up the approach of another group of monsters. It was another pack, and they were closing in fast. Cross was shocked. Where had they been hiding all this time? Lloyd admitted that he himself did not know, but it was clear. The wolves and the newly appeared monsters were not a coincidence. He slowly rose to his feet and declared that all this, it looks too much like a trap. He repeated out loud, "Someone set them up." He then asked Yui if she had done anything to anger anyone. She confidently replied that she had not, and asked him to tell her what he had learned about the approaching horde. Lloyd reported that it consisted of many different creatures, numbering in the thousands. Everyone was shocked. They asked him if he was joking, but Lloyd was dead serious. A thought was spinning in his head. Someone clearly wanted to eliminate them. Perhaps this was a way to distract them from Ishtar. The monsters were gathered to create a mass threat and force quests to exterminate them, and then lure the only S-rank team capable of handling such a challenge here. Yui said that in that case, it would be better to leave here. It would be possible to bypass the army with detection magic. But Lloyd interrupted her, saying that it was impossible. They could not be sure that the monsters would not smell them. After all, they could be tracked by their smell. Besides, if the battle starts near the city, innocent people might get hurt. Yui understood and agreed. Lloyd looked at everyone and said that they only had one way left. They must accept the fight. Yui nodded, but the team was confused. They asked if he was really suggesting to fight against an army of thousands. Lloyd firmly replied that this was the only chance. Yui was afraid. How could they cope with such a number of enemies? However, Lloyd seemed to have a plan already. He turned to Cross and asked if he could hit the stone. Cross asked, "The black one?" Lloyd confirmed. Cross looked at the target, estimating the range. He said he could probably hit it, but he wasn't sure if he could destroy it. Lloyd said not to worry and just shoot. Cross nodded, accepting the assignment. And Lloyd thought to himself that one shot might not be enough. So his job now is to support Cross and help him get the shot to maximum effect. Lloyd activated a special spell, the enhancement magic, Best of All, which strengthens the body and weapons at the same time. Cross fired, and his arrow crunched as it shattered the black stone into pieces, causing a wave of magical backlash. He looked at Lloyd in surprise and asked what he had done with his arrow. It was many times more powerful than usual. Lloyd replied that he had simply enhanced both Cross and his weapon. Cross asked if it was possible to enhance both a person and an object at the same time. Lloyd, slightly surprised, noted that it was a given for him. Cross admitted that he doubted it, as it was far from common practice. Lloyd thought to himself that he had only enhanced his strength slightly. Considering that it took only one shot to hit a target at a great distance, Cross was rightfully considered an S-rank adventurer, perhaps even stronger than Ruru. At this point, Yui loudly called out to everyone, pointing to the battlefield. She pointed to the higher wolves, who were now fighting among themselves. Lloyd explained that the destruction of the stone had dispelled the magic that had been controlling them. It wouldn't stop them completely, but it would reduce their numbers. Now they could focus on the next wave. Yui was shocked and asked if he knew this would happen. Lloyd said he had, but warned that the next horde wouldn't be so easy. He noted that the new wave could contain different types of monsters, and the stone would no longer exist. It was good that none of them were particularly strong. He turned to Silica and asked what elements she could control. Silica confidently answered that she had mastery over fire, water, earth, and wind, all 4 elements. Lloyd nodded, then asked Cross how many arrows he had left. He estimated, and replied that he had about 100. Lloyd clearly had a clear plan. He said that if everyone was ready, he would announce it right now. He outlined his strategy, and the team took up battle positions, preparing for battle. A few minutes later, the monsters appeared. A whole army was moving towards them. Yui exclaimed in horror that they were already close. Silica, trembling, added that there were too many of them. Yui turned to Lloyd, saying that this was not enough. Lloyd calmly replied that they just needed to wait a little while. 1 more second, and everything will be ready. And so he gave the command. This was the signal for Silica, and she immediately began to act according to the plan. The girl activated the firestorm spell, unleashing a stream of flaming magic on her enemies. The monsters began to burn right before everyone's eyes, turning into smoking remains. Dagas and Yui, shocked by the power of the attack, watched in amazement. Yui asked what he did to Silica. Her magic became 10 times stronger. Lloyd answered that he simply cast a strengthening charm on her, which increases the power of spells and reduces mana consumption. Yui asked in surprise, "Is that all?" Lloyd, with a slight chuckle, asked, "Isn't that enough?" He turned to Silica and asked if she was okay and ready to continue. She nodded and said she had enough mana for 5 more spells. Lloyd recommended switching to wind magic after 3. Silica agreed. He then climbed the hill where Cross was waiting. Lloyd had enhanced all of his arrows with the same magic to increase their destructive power. After the successful attack, he reflected. Given the wind fanning the flames, most of the forest had become a smoldering, fiery front. He told Cross that the smoke would obscure the flying monster's view and that they needed to move now. Cross agreed. It was time to act. Lloyd extended his hand and activated a mental link spell. He was going to use detection magic and transmit the exact coordinates of the enemies to Cross. When the transmission ended, he asked Cross if he could see the targets. Cross confirmed. The smoke seemed to have disappeared. The view was perfect. He pulled the bowstring and fired arrows one after another towards the enemy. Lloyd noted that everything was going perfectly so far, and they had already dealt with the main ground enemies. He thought it was time to move on to the second phase of the plan. He returned to Silica and informed her that they were moving on to the next stage. Silica nodded, but noticed that her mana was almost depleted. Lloyd said he understood everything. That's why. He took Silica's hand and transferred some of his mana to her. Immediately after the transmission, he felt very dizzy and fell to the ground. Silica rushed to him in fear, asking if he was okay. Lloyd assured her that he had simply overdone it. But she had enough strength now. Silica gathered her courage and concentrated the magic in her hands again, and she caused rain to fall on the burning forest. Lloyd said that now there was no need to worry about the fire spreading. Silica, exhausted to the limit, nodded, adding that this was all she could do. Losing her balance, she almost fell, but Dagas was there in time and caught her. Yui praised her for the work she had done, saying that now they would take care of the rest. Now Silica can rest. They will destroy the rest of the monsters themselves. Silica smiled weakly, asking them not to overdo it. Yui chuckled and said that it was strange to hear her say that. In any case, it was impressive that Lloyd was able to develop such a precise and effective strategy. Lloyd replied that he had done nothing special, he had simply acted as a support mage. Yui sighed at this humble answer again and said that as usual he was putting himself down. She told him to stay and rest for a while. They would take care of the rest. Lloyd nodded, but decided to himself, use the rest of his mana. He cast the finishing buff on the entire team. After that, his strength was completely exhausted. He crouched by the cliff and muttered that if this was all he could do, he still had a long way to go. Yui and Dagas quickly finished off the remaining monsters. Yui noted that Lloyd's magic spells were incredible. When they returned to the others, Lloyd thanked them for their work and activated detection magic, noting that there were no threats left nearby. He turned to Silica, asking how she was feeling. She looked tired, but said that she had recovered a little and could continue. Then Lloyd suggested that Yui hurry up and return to the city. Yui, surprised by the haste, asked why there was such a hurry. Lloyd replied that the real goal of those behind all this is Ishtar. The team was stunned by this statement. Lloyd explained that this entire mission was a trap. Someone wanted to distract them by taking the S-rank team away from the city so that no one would suspect anything. Yui didn't believe what was happening and asked why someone would keep them away. Cross reminded them that Ishtar had not only heroes, but also city guards. Lloyd said that everything was much more complicated than it seemed. That was the trick. If the attackers wanted to hit the kingdom, they would have chosen a less well-defended city. Yui asked why Ishtar then. Lloyd admitted that it was difficult to explain, but he was sure that they needed to return immediately. At the same time, 4 mysterious people gathered in one of the huts in Ishtar. They stood around a wooden table. One of them said that the plan was going perfectly. The other nodded and added that the S-rank adventurers had been lured out successfully. True, the heroes who remained in the city were not so simple either, but even they could be dealt with by their strengthened golems. He also noted that the current heroes looked weak compared to the past ones. He chuckled, remembering how the shield woman had lost her arm from a single blow from a wolf. It had been ridiculous and funny, and the healer who called herself a saint had turned out to be a fraud. There shouldn't be such dependence on one person as their leader. But that's over. Their plan is doomed to succeed, all thanks to their owner. And that same girl. In the corner of the room, a girl was chained to the wall, barely able to stand on her feet. Her body was covered in wounds. She looked exhausted. One of the men, examining her, said that the magic she uses is very useful, but it is worth being polite. Perhaps this beast girl will continue to help them. He raised his staff and said that she would play a crucial role in the ritual to resurrect their master. They could not fail. Success must be assured, all in the name of their master, and for the return of the demon lord. Meanwhile, in Ishtar itself, Alan was furious. He couldn't believe what had happened and was overcome with anger. The girls from his team stood nearby, not knowing how to calm him down. They themselves were depressed, confused, and scared. Alan furiously shouted that he was surrounded by incompetent fools. Even though the hero's team was still looking for new members, Alan said he was willing to forget that they had failed to find a replacement for Lena, but to forgive the failure to find anyone to replace the useless Lloyd was beyond the pale. Shaina quietly asked what they should do now. There was not a single worthy candidate among them. The magician picked up the application form from the floor and thought. The requirements were indeed high, but perhaps the reason for the refusals was something else. It's all about the recent failure. A lost quest, a seriously injured team member, and a shameful escape. Rumors have already reached the capital. Even with the hero's name behind them, no one is in a hurry to follow them. Alan sat down heavily in his chair and said they had a couple of candidates to replace Lena. They weren't as talented, but they would do. Replacing Lloyd was a problem. They at least need someone who can use storage magic. Sheena noted that none of the candidates knew it, and the most they could do was cast 2 buffs at once. Ruru suggested doing without a support mage altogether. Now, perhaps, it is not so critical. But then there was a knock at the door. 2 knights entered and, bowing their heads, asked the heroes forgiveness for disturbing them. Alan stood up, walked up to them, and asked if the knights had any business for him. One of them reported that a patrol in the forest had detected a threat. A horde was approaching Ishtar. Their number is about 10,000. This stunned the entire team. Alan, not hiding his irritation, asked what they wanted from him. The knight answered that they asked for help in repelling the attack. It was an official emergency request made in an emergency situation. By law, such a request requires an immediate response from the heroes. Ignoring it without good reason threatens to strip the title. Alan clenched his fists and hissed, "Why now?" The knights said they would wait outside and left. Left alone with the team, Alan asked Sheena what would happen if he refused. She replied that in that case, he would most likely lose his status as a hero. And since the team's funding comes from the state, refusing would bring public condemnation. Alan realized that the people would demand answers. That if they stood up to the horde, then they'll have a chance to make up for their failure, right? Sheena nodded hesitantly. Alan said that success in this mission could not only erase their defeat, but also restore his glory. Perhaps even outshine the other 3 heroes. The girls didn't immediately understand what he was getting at and just looked at each other. And Alan, with a grin, said that everything was clear. Ruru wanted to say something, but she didn't have time. He rushed to the exit. He loudly announced that they would destroy this army of monsters. They need to get together urgently. They will play a key role in this battle. Throwing open the doors, he declared that he would show the whole world how great his heroism was. Behind him, the girls just looked at each other in bewilderment. At the same time, Yui's team was rushing towards Ishtar with all their might. Yui said that Lloyd's magic could help them out in any situation. They ran faster than they could, and they didn't seem to feel tired. Dagus noted that at this rate, they would soon reach the city. Lloyd explained that he had used acceleration magic optimized specifically for running. Nothing special. Silica approached him and asked if he was okay, as constantly using buffs required a lot of mana. Lloyd agreed that yes it was, but only for those who weren't used to it. Over time, he said, the mana consumption would decrease if the magic was used regularly. He explained that constant practice helps build resilience and reduce costs. He recalled how his mentor once left him in the forest for a week. His task was to survive. A lone white mage cannot defeat monsters head-on. He could only run. In order to survive, he began to study different forms of enhancement, experimenting, hoping to create new spells suitable for combat and survival situations. It had been a great training session, although he now admitted that it had seemed like hell at the time. Yui had appeared next to him and asked if his training had really been that brutal. Lloyd said it was possible he was just inexperienced at the time. The training was probably normal. Although looking back, he wasn't so sure. His mentor often got angry at him without explanation. Yui replied that she did not consider such methods normal, even among adventurers. Lloyd thought about it. So this was considered excessive for them? Was it really below their standards? He realized S-rank adventurers really were on a different level. He had admitted again that he wasn't good enough. Yui whispered to Silica that he had gotten it all wrong again. And why was he so sure of it? Suddenly, Lloyd stopped. He reported that his detection magic had detected several life energy sources nearby. Cross asked warily if these were the remnants of monsters that had escaped control. Lloyd replied that if that were the case, there would be no cause for concern, but he had an uneasy feeling. He felt like he had felt this aura before. He told the team to move forward, and he would return as soon as he checked one thing. Yui insisted that they go with him. Lloyd was against it, saying that he could handle it alone. Yui disagreed. They didn't know what might happen, and after all, Lloyd wasn't a lone fighter. Lloyd realized she was right and apologized for the extra trouble. Yui just sighed and reminded him that they were a team. Of course they would always lend a shoulder. Lloyd smiled faintly, glad that he could count on them. He thanked each of them and said, "Follow him." At this time, Alan had already arrived at the Adventurers Guild with his team. He glanced at the assembled group and sarcastically remarked that these were the ones who responded to his call. They looked much weaker than he expected. Then again, he hadn't expected much. Let them not worry. The role of living shields would suit them just fine. The adventurers glared at him, but he didn't even notice. Alan dismissively threw out, "Is everyone here really that stupid?" One of the knights calmly explained that there were few adventurers. S rank was currently outside the city, and there were no A ranks in Ishtar. Alan chuckled. That meant only B rank and below in the hall. Oh well, the main thing was that they didn't get in the way. Someone in the crowd suggested moving on to a strategic discussion. Everyone agreed. Alan smiled with satisfaction and began laying out a plan. He sat down and announced that the mages would unleash their most powerful spells first, causing an explosion that would destroy a dozen monsters. While they recharged, he and the knights would distract the enemies. After the mana was restored, the mages would repeat the attack. According to his calculations, this should be enough to defeat the horde. However, unlike him, the others were clearly not thrilled. Everyone stared at him in surprise and disbelief, as if they were expecting this to be a joke. Alan was irritated by their silence and stood up, demanding an explanation. One of the girls said that although she was a mage, she could not use such destructive spells. Many in the room supported her. Even in the best case, they said, she would be able to defeat one or two enemies. Mia, a member of Alan's team, came forward and also admitted that she could not cope. Alan did not believe her and asked if she was serious. He couldn't understand. Why does she keep fixating on one failure? It was just a mistake. But Mia quietly countered. She tried again and again, all to no avail. She could never use such powerful spells. The hall was completely silent. No one expected to hear such words from her. The other teams began to whisper, realizing that even a hero was not a guarantee of success. That meant they would not be able to do it either. Hearing this, Alan turned to Lulu and Sheena, asking for support. Lulu told Mia that Alan was right. Not everyone gets it right the first time. Sheena added that it was just a failure, nothing to be upset about. Alan came closer and told Mia that even Lulu and Sheena supported him. As long as he was around, they were safe. But Mia interrupted him. Since they failed that quest, he hadn't trained once, and after that he still says that everything will be fine? Those present began to whisper. Could it really be that he had been inactive all this time? Alan hesitated, not knowing what to answer. He started making excuses. He was busy, they were looking for new participants. But Mia could no longer restrain herself. With tears in her eyes, she said that he had changed. He was no longer the Alan she once loved. And without waiting for an answer, she ran out of the room. Alan wanted to rush after her, but 3 knights blocked his way. He shouted for them to move away, but they did not move, and coldly asked what to make of his behavior. One of them said that he had not only lost the trust of the team, but also withdrawn himself. Alan shouted that he was a hero and that it was his right. In response, the knight pushed him, throwing in his face that he was not worthy of this title. Alan turned white with rage. He hissed, "What kind of insolence is this?" And he tried to hit the knight, but he easily stopped him. Then he said coldly that he had never seen a hero so weak. Better let him go. Lulu came up behind him and quietly said that maybe they really should leave. Alan turned around, confused. He looked at the faces of everyone present and asked bitterly if everyone really had a claim on him. He said that he didn't care if something happened to them. Alan then left the guild, still seething with anger. He threw over his shoulder that he didn't think they should have left. Sheena tried to remind him that refusing to help with an emergency request could have serious consequences, but Alan cut her off, saying that he knew that too. Did these idiots really think they could handle an army of monsters on their own? He grinned evilly and said let them try it themselves. When it all started, they would beg him to come back and save them. Meanwhile, inside the guild, people were discussing what had happened. Many were saying that it was now clear what this hero was really like. He didn't match the legends at all. One of the knights thought about it. He recalled that Alan's team had seemed incredibly well coordinated the last time. Their actions, their strategy, their coordination, everything had been flawless. What could have happened to them in the meantime? At that moment, Lena entered the guild. She was immediately recognized. The girl confidently approached the knight and said that although she was not as strong as before, she asked for an opportunity to help her. She admitted that she can't fight like she used to and doesn't know if she can be useful, but she can at least be a shield for others. And for that, she's willing to fight. She bowed and asked permission to participate in the battle. The knight was embarrassed, asked her not to bow, and said that he would gladly accept her help. He even thought that Lena was like 100 fighters. She thanked him and apologized if she was in the way. The knight replied that they were lucky, not her. He asked her not to keep everything to herself and to be sure to tell him if she needed support. Lena nodded and said that she would like to ask one question. Do any of them know a magician named Lloyd? At this time, Yui's team reached the forest hut. Yui asked Lloyd if they really had come to the right address. Lloyd nodded in the affirmative. Now that he was closer, he was sure that there was a demon inside. Yui didn't immediately understand what he was talking about. She asked again if he was talking about a demon. But in fact, demons are the inhabitants of the lands of darkness. During the era when the demon lord himself ruled over them, they waged war against the kingdom of Fulen, the Foret Empire, and the Holy Kingdom. Even now, demons are forbidden to cross the borders of these three countries. Yui asked how one ended up here then. Maybe he snuck in? She added that she should report this to the knights later. Cross asked cautiously, "Is it necessary to enter the hut? It is very dangerous." Lloyd agreed that there was a risk. But as he approached, he felt the same energy that emanated from the black stone. It could be related to the army of monsters that was approaching. If their target is indeed Ishtar, then they have reason to take the risk. But the decision, as always, remains with the team. Yui gathered everyone and firmly said that they must act. Their goal is to protect Ishtar. If the demons escape, it will be too late. The demons couldn't be missed. Something had to be done to stop them. The team agreed with her reasoning. Dagas added that perhaps this hut held the key to solving the whole situation. Yui nodded and said that it was time to go. Cross asked the logical question, how would they get in? Lloyd said that, to be precise, there is no demon inside the hut itself. He turned to Silica and asked if she could use earth magic like before. After all, the monsters would soon begin an attack on the city, and their next step would be... At that moment, the men felt a vibration in the hut itself. One of them asked in surprise if it was an earthquake, but they immediately realized that no, something else was happening. And then the ceiling collapsed with a crash, revealing Yui's team. Silica looked down in amazement and asked, "What? Really? Under the hut? Where was the underground room?" One of the men was crushed by the rubble, but was still conscious and trying to reach for his staff. Yui noticed this and stopped his movement. Another man survived too. He stood up, looked around gloomily and muttered, "Are all the others dead?" And he added that it was all about this beastman. But at that moment, Lloyd appeared in front of him. The man tried to do something, but Lloyd disappeared from view. He lost his breath and coughed from the dust that was interfering with his spells. But Lloyd acted quickly. He incapacitated the enemy, tying him up before he could utter a word. He said he had managed to catch him after all. He secured the man to the beam and noted with satisfaction that he would no longer be able to use magic. Daggers came over and asked if he was okay. Lloyd nodded and asked in return, "How did the operation go for the others?" Yui nodded and reported that they had managed to destroy 3 demons. Lloyd thanked her, to which she replied that as long as they worked together, nothing was impossible. Lloyd smiled. Everything went smoothly thanks to each of them. He added that he couldn't have done it without their support. Yui agreed with a slight smile. It was indeed true. Suddenly, an excited Cross ran up to them and called everyone to follow him as quickly as possible. The team rushed after him without hesitation. He led them to a girl chained to a wall in a dungeon. Her condition was alarming, but in fact, it was horrific. Everyone present was shocked by what they saw. The girl was immediately freed and brought to the surface. Yui, noticing the peculiarities of her appearance, clarified that she was probably a beastman. Cross noted that she was in very bad condition. Yui asked Lloyd to try to heal her. He agreed. Lloyd activated healing magic, concentrating the energy in his palms. Gradually, the girl felt better. Yui was shocked. Right before her eyes, her wounds began to heal. Silica noted that Lloyd's healing magic was simply incredible. Lloyd modestly said that with a real healer, the result would have been much more effective. He thought to himself that this was the reason he never used healing magic in the hero's team. He added out loud that, although the magic had been reworked by him, it was not that important. Yui looked at him in surprise and asked again, did he redefine magic? It was impossible to change the properties of magic at will. Silica agreed. Only a few could control magic like that. Lloyd just shrugged. He thought internally that his master often created new spells, but maybe she was just eccentric. Then, everyone came to check on the Beast Girl's condition. Yui noted that her wounds had healed, but she still hadn't regained consciousness. Lloyd explained that he had only healed the body, not the soul. He then suggested interrogation. Everyone turned to the tied-up man. Yui took off his gag, and Lloyd warned him that if he tried to do anything stupid, he would put him down. The man shouted that they must have all been trapped. Why were they still alive? Lloyd coldly replied that it didn't matter anymore. The main thing was, why did they come to this country? Yui, with her sword at his throat, demanded an answer, adding that he shouldn't even try to deceive them. The man only chuckled and said that it was too late, because at this very moment, an army of monsters is moving towards Ishtar. Among them are the strengthened monsters that previously destroyed even the hero's team. It will be impossible to stop them. Lloyd asked if they had used amplifying magic on the monsters. The man confirmed that the monsters had been amplified by one of the 4 heavenly lords, the one who had created them. Ishtar was doomed. No matter what they did, anything they did would be useless. And the next second, he threw himself onto Yui's sword, ending his life. Tross, shocked, breathed out that he had committed suicide. Dagus noted grimly, if his words were true, their situation was critical. Lloyd thought about it. War always takes lives. But why attack Ishtar? Yui wanted to say something, but Lloyd interrupted her. He knows he will increase the support magic. They will make it in time. Definitely. Meanwhile, active preparations for defense were underway in the city. One of the knights reported to the commander that all preparations were complete. The commander nodded. The knight added that they had a supply of potions and arrows. And although the fortifications were temporary, the moat and bastions had already been built. But would that be enough? The man said that with these measures, they could only buy a little time. Everything else depended on whether the S-rank team would return in time. The knight replied that he understood. The commander asked with a smile. He was worried, wasn't he? And Dite shook his head. But the man understood everything without words and told him not to be embarrassed. He felt the same way. Their fate now does not depend on one person. SSS. Meanwhile, in the guild, Lena asked if anyone knew a mage named Lloyd. One of the knights asked again, wasn't he the white mage who was recently kicked out of the hero's team? Perhaps they were talking about him? Lena nodded and said that she realized something important. The most valuable person in the hero's team is not Alan or Saint Shina. Sace. It was the white magician Lloyd. The knights looked at each other. One of them asked incredulously, is this really true? Lena looked down and admitted that she didn't understand why she hadn't seen the obvious before. After all, it was he who adjusted Alan's strategy. He gave orders in battle. He corrected their mistakes and saved them at critical moments. All of this is him. All of this was done by Lloyd. One of the men noted that support mages usually remain in the shadows. Even in famous teams, their names are often forgotten. Lena admitted that they were blinded by the title of hero. In reality, it was only thanks to Lloyd and his magic that they had come this far. But she treated him selfishly and cruelly. Then one girl remembered that just a few days ago she saw Lloyd talking to the S-rank adventurer, Miss Yui. Lena rushed to her, exclaiming, "Is this true? And where is he now?" A man came up from behind and said that Lloyd is not in town now. It was Ergo's boss. He said that Lloyd had gone on a quest that would require several days of travel. He wouldn't be able to return in time. Lena suddenly realized how amazing Lloyd was. If his magic could speed up movement, then maybe. She turned to everyone and, without even waiting for their agreement, asked them to listen to her. Ergo stood on the roof and looked down. He knew that everyone supported her, but the anxiety did not leave them. No one left the city because they can't leave their homes. They want to protect their families, their loved ones, their city. And it's too late to run. Suddenly, a cry came from the watchtower. "An army of monsters is approaching!" The commander immediately ordered to take positions. The first to speak were archers. They released a barrage of arrows, aiming towards the enemy. Then the shield bearers went into battle, ready to take the first blow. Lena shouted an order. "Hold the line and push the enemies into the ditch." The mages then began the attack, using the initial spell, Fireball. It was weak, but mana effective and accurate. The flames, spreading across the moat, should have caused damage to anyone who came close. The magic girls looked at the knights and said that now everything depended on them. One of them used the spell Water Shaft. The second one thought the streams of water washed away the charred bodies of the monsters, widening the ditch and strengthening the defense. All they could do was repeat it again and again until the S-rank team and the white mage Lloyd return. If they hold out, the city will have a chance. But everything turned out to be much more difficult than expected. The monsters began to break through the defense. One of the knights shouted, "They broke through the right flank!" It was no longer possible to hold the line. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. One of the mages reported that he had run out of mana. The potion supplies were almost exhausted. The knight called out to the archers. "Were there any arrows left?" One of the fighters shouted desperately, "There are too many of them!" One of the knights was on the verge of being trampled by the monster. But Lena arrived in time, exclaiming that she would not allow this. She rushed to help and asked if he was okay. The man thanked her. Lena told him to leave it to her, but inside she felt, if this goes on, Ergo whispered in alarm that they were losing people. It becomes impossible to contain the onslaught. And then, at the most desperate moment, a firestorm fell from the sky. Flames engulfed the battlefield, burning the monsters to the ground. Lena's heart skipped a beat and she immediately realized who it was. Lena looked towards the raging flames, where the firestorm was coming from, and saw Lloyd and his new team standing between the city and death. Lloyd came closer and asked if they had made it in time. The beast girl was still unconscious on his back. He turned to Silica and asked if she was okay. She confidently replied that she could continue the fight. Lloyd noted to himself that she had already recovered her mana. Not surprising, since she was an S-rank. Dagas asked what their next steps were, but Lloyd asked for some time to think. Then he asked if they would mind if he took command. After all, Dagas used to do that, right? Inwardly, he still remembered how no one in the hero's team even listened to his words. But Dagas just smiled and said he didn't see a problem with that. Lloyd was doing great and knew a lot. Yui added that Cross had previously performed support functions, but unlike Lloyd, they weren't as good at tactical management. They asked if they could rely on him now. Lloyd nodded, smiling slightly, that he understood. The first thing they need to do is support the knights, while the flames hold back the advancing monsters. But to do this, they need to know the current situation on the battlefield. Yui and Dagas went forward, clearing the way. When they reached the fortifications, they were alarmed to find that the situation was catastrophic. The defenses had been breached. They spotted a group of knights in the distance, and Yui signaled to the team. She waved her arms and shouted for everyone to watch their step. The area was dangerous. The entire team jumped over the moat. Lloyd asked if the moat had stopped the monsters from advancing. Yui turned to her team, checking if everyone was safe. Silica replied that without Lloyd's enhancement magic, things would have been tough for them. Two knights approached and asked if they were an S-rank team and if Lloyd was the white mage. They also noticed the beast girl behind him and asked who she was. Lloyd replied that she was injured and asked him to take care of her. Handing the girl over to the knights, Yui said that they were going to help the others. And as soon as Lloyd received the report, he should give further instructions. Lloyd asked the knights to update him on how much strength and resources they had left. He looked around and asked where the hero Alan was. Wasn't the request urgent? The knights replied that Alan had not arrived. There was a conflict in the guild, and now he was sitting in his residence. Lloyd was shocked. He asked again if it was really only because of this. The knights confirmed. Rage boiled inside Lloyd. How could he abandon the defenders because of such stupidity? Doesn't Alan understand that the lives of ordinary people are at stake? The knights admitted that their strength was running out. Now their only hope was the S-rank team and Lloyd himself. Lloyd thought about it. He knew Yui and her people could help. But he himself, why him? The knight said he heard that he was an amazing man. They exchanged glances. Lloyd sighed and said that they would leave that for later. First, the current situation. At that moment, the Beast Girl woke up and asked in confusion where she was. One of the knights approached her and asked her not to get up. She looked confused, but remembered what had happened and spoke. Lloyd leaned over to her and noted that she was awake. The knight confirmed that she was still disoriented. Lloyd asked her a question. Who did she mean when she said they? Did she really have allies? The girl shook her head in horror. No, she was talking about monsters. They were under the influence of magic. Lloyd frowned. That's what he thought. The source of the magic was herself. He calmly said that if she was looking for monsters, then… The girl looked around in panic and grabbed Lloyd by his clothes. With a trembling voice, she repeated, "The monsters are controllable, but she does not control them." Lloyd asked her to calm down and asked directly, "This is her magic, isn't it?" He apologized, but emphasized that there was no time for long conversations now. The attack would begin any minute. He asked her to give her name. The girl answered, Kureka. Lloyd said that if things went on as they were, both monsters and humans would die. She had to admit. Could she control the monsters? Kureha nodded hesitantly. Yes, but the demons did it. They forced her. Her mother taught her that control magic was dangerous. She didn't want things to go this far. Lloyd thought that if such magic existed, it could easily be turned into a weapon. He asked what exactly she could do with her power. Kureha admitted that she had almost no mana left. Lloyd asked if she could handle it if he restored her mana and strengthened the spell. Kureha replied that controlling such a horde was very difficult. But still, she said she would try. Otherwise, she would never forgive herself if she didn't save anyone. Lloyd looked at her in amazement. Was she really worried about monsters? They approached the tower. Lloyd handed her the potion and told her to drink it. Kureha obeyed. Lloyd drank the potion himself. He looked ahead and said that when they started. Kureha clasped her hands and thought, she promised to try, but how many could she really save? The next moment, Lloyd concentrated and filled Kureha with mana, as if he had simply poured a stream of energy into her. The girl opened her eyes in amazement and whispered weakly. What was that? Lloyd explained that he had cast several spells on her, reducing mana consumption and increasing magical effects. He had also adjusted the flow of mana to her own nature. Besides that, he gave her some of his energy. It may not be much, but it was enough. He asked if she could handle it. Kureha nodded and smiled faintly. It seemed like everything would be fine. She looked at him curiously and asked who he really was. Lloyd just shrugged and said that there was no need to suspect him. Kureha hurried to reassure him. No, she didn't mean that at all. Inwardly, she thought that this was the first time she had felt such powerful and precise support magic. Lloyd calmly reminded her that now she needed to ask the monsters to go into the forest. Kureha nodded. She was ready. Taking a deep breath, she folded her hands and began to chant. The words were in an unfamiliar, almost sing-song language. Lloyd listened intently. He had never heard anything like it. Was it singing? The very second the magical melody spread across the battlefield, the monsters suddenly froze. And then, as if waking up, they turned around and began to retreat into the forest, one after another. This caused a real shock among the knights and all those who had just fought a desperate battle with them. But such magic required incredible effort. Kureha staggered and almost fell to the ground. Lloyd was there in an instant and supported her, asking if she was okay. The girl, smiling tiredly, said that she could handle it.